Today's date is June 9, 2024. This is the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation federal government simulation. Today we have Professor Ori Yehudai of Ohio State University. We are proposing a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine together, a separate government from the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, a government that will be based on a constitution, a democratic government, separation between religion and government, with 300 parliament members representing the entire area of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, 300 parliament members who represent their districts. Each district will have 48,000 people and one representative who will be elected. We are proposing the creation of three branches: a traditional democratic system with a separate parliament, a separate executive branch, and a separate judicial branch, all of it based on equality between the Israelis and the Palestinians. My name is Joseph Avasar, and you could reach me at josephavassar@gmail.com. If you click on IP Confederation, you'll be able to read our Constitution and frequently asked questions. The Constitution is in 3 languages, and it's a very interesting read. It explains the entire system and how this common federal government will be created and what will be the relationship between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments with the common federal government. We do not propose the dismantling of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are proposing the creation of a third independent separate government for the people of Israel and Palestine for the purpose of making peace. Today's guest is Professor Ori Yehudai. Ori Yehudai is an associate professor of history at the Ohio State University, where he holds the Schuttenstein Chair in Israel Studies. He earned his bachelor's degree from Tel Aviv University and his PhD from the University of Chicago. He's the author of Leaving Zions: Jewish Immigration from Palestine to Israel After World War II, which was a finalist in the 2020 National Jewish Book Awards. His current research deals with Israeli-Palestinian violence during the 1970s. At Ohio State University, he teaches the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict and Israeli-Palestinian relations. I met with Professor Yehudai about 2 weeks ago, and he chose to deal with legislation regarding rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel and joint economic zone. We will have next on June 23rd, the dean or previous dean of Jerusalem Law School, Professor Barak Medina. On July 7th, we will have Professor Amir Hatzroni, who is also a professor of communication, novelist, comedian, and social media personality, and known for his anti-Zionist views and his support for the BDS movement. These are the people that previously participated in the simulations. Some of them participated twice, and some have endorsed our formula for peace by recording a video in support of the formula for peace that we are proposing. These are the people that we have contacted several times in the past. Unfortunately, for one reason or another, they either refused or ignored our request, and we will continue to seek them to seek their participation and to ask them poignant questions about why is it that they do not support, if they do not support, I'm making an assumption here, but we'll ask them questions about the federal government that we are proposing. The simulation will take approximately 120 minutes. That includes question and answers. We conduct the simulations in segments, and we asked Professor Yehudai to give us his opinion or comments or his questions after each segment. So this is not a lecture. This is a simulation in which we are demonstrating how the federal government will work, and we will ask you to ask questions, and we will give an opportunity to Professor Yehudai to ask questions and to make comments. This is a short video that explains what the IPC is about. I'd like to play it. It's a 2.5-minute video.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? Something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So we are actually going to simulate today what's on that video. And the objective of this simulation is to demonstrate how a federal government could make peace. We are not presenting this simulation, and we do not expect the common federal government to be an Israeli government or a Palestinian government. We do not expect the federal government to resolve issues based on the Israeli point of view or the Palestinian point of view. The whole essence of the simulation is to demonstrate that a common federal government will have its own narrative, its own point of view for the people of Israel and Palestine. We expect to have a rigorous discussion with Professor Yehudai, and we do not preclude other solutions. In fact, we are encouraging other formulas for peace, and we are not claiming exclusivity. We will ask Professor Yehudai to be fair and to judge us and the formula that we are presenting, not based on perfection, but what's the alternative? What other formula for peace, including coming from the Israeli or the Palestinian governments, is a better alternative? What we are proposing, or what we are doing today, is demonstrating the inability, or what we expect would be the inability of the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to veto legislation that are good for their people, for the people of Israel and Palestine. It doesn't mean that we are actually proposing these ideas. We're just demonstrating that reasonable legislation would not be objected very quickly by the Israeli or the Palestinian government, because they will have to think twice before they veto the legislation. So this is really what we are trying to show, that the government of Israel and the government of Palestine will have to think twice before it will act contrary to what a federal government will pass. So some people have asked me, well, you're proposing this, you're proposing that. We're not really proposing anything of substance. What we are trying to demonstrate is that there are ways to create legislation that both sides will have a hard time vetoing. We're asking you to look at the big pictures, not getting into technical arguments. We're limited by time, and we're asking you to refrain from comments, but we're actually encouraging all of you to ask questions. Professor Yehudai will be allowed to ask questions and to make comments, but the audience is asked to ask questions only until the end, and at that time you can make your comments as well. Confederation governments exist worldwide to address specific conflicts. Some governments refer to themselves as federal governments, while others use the term confederation. Definitions are not fixed and evolve with changing realities. In the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation defines confederation as a shared government for the people of Israel and Palestine, guided by democratic principles outlined in the IPC Constitution, which can be found at ipconfederation.org. Because some guests have said, well, are you a confederation or are you a federation? And the answer to that is we are both. We are defining the terminology. We're not following terminology. This is a simulation, and we are asking you to understand that we are only mimicking the operation of a proposed system. This is not a lecture. If I show you an airplane and you say, well, how does this thing fly? That's a question. But if you say airplane cause pollutions, that's a comment. Questions help understand the concept. Comments derail the simulation while preventing a full, uninterrupted presentation. We are asking for your courtesy in allowing us a full opportunity to present the IPC formula. Make your comments at the end or write them on the Zoom chat feature. This is the heart of the simulation for you to understand and to see that it works, that the simulation itself could work. So you have to assume that we were able to obtain major funding to spend on a year-long campaign to create a platform for the election, to promote the election, to promote people who are willing to run for parliament and for president, to make sure that the entire population in Israel and Palestine understand the concept of a federal government and that they will be able to vote, and the election will take 3 months, not 1 day, not 1 week, but 3 months, in order to allow as many people to vote. You'll also have to assume that 5 million people have voted out of the 14 million in the area, excluding children. So actually, 10 million people will be eligible to vote, and you'll have to assume that a total of 5 million people voted. 3 million of them are Palestinians, and 2 million are Israelis. You'll have to assume that a president was elected by 1.5 million votes. You'll have to assume, for the purpose of the simulation, to make it easier for me to conduct the simulation, you'll have to assume that I, Joseph, was elected president, and the Palestinian lady was elected as vice president, and we will rotate in 2 years. So that it's clear, I never intend to run for either president or vice president or parliament member, And not only I do not intend to run, I am not qualified under the Constitution because I do not reside in Israel or Palestine. You'll also have to assume that 300 parliament members were elected in 300 districts, and each district represent 47,000 people. I think I said 48,000 before, but it's actually 47,000 people. So you'll have to make all these assumptions. Before I go to Professor Yehudai to ask if he has questions or comments, let me ask the audience. Now, do you have any questions, not comments, but questions regarding these assumptions? Please raise your hand or just speak outright. Do you have any questions regarding these assumptions? If you do, this is your opportunity to ask your question, if it's not clear. Okay, I see no questions being raised. I assume that you understand the assumptions. Let me go to Professor Ori Yehudai. Professor Yehudai, do you have any questions or comments regarding these assumptions?
Hi, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I also have some general comments on the on the whole proposal.
Ori, can you improve your sound because it sounds a little.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we could hear you before, but it just sounded a little. There's an echo something. Okay, go ahead. Well,
is it better now?
It's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. I also have some general comments or questions about the whole structure and proposal. Maybe we can discuss it later. I don't know if this is the time to bring them up. Or...
Yeah, but only about the assumptions. If you have any comments or questions regarding the assumptions that are before you on the screen.
Yeah. So regarding the assumptions, I guess I'm wondering what leads you to believe that 5 million people would participate in that process. I mean, given the atmosphere currently, it's hard to imagine that so many people would support, a project of cooperation or joint government. I'm wondering why do you assume that 3 million Palestinians would vote, 2 million Israelis would vote, and generally, why do you think that a relatively large number of Palestinians and Israelis would accept such a program of cooperation and joint government?
Well, because first, we've done this simulations many times in the past. We saw a lot more interest and by the Palestinians than the Israelis. After October 7, we believe that it has actually proven that the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments are not able to give peace to the people of Israel and Palestine. I personally believe that there is a search out there for a solution that the Israeli, I am now in Israel, as a matter of fact, and I speak with a lot of people, and all the people that I speak with are telling me that there is a thirst for some sort of a vision. I agree, they didn't say this is the right vision, but there is a thirst for a vision by the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I met with Palestinians as well on my visit. But even without my visit, I don't really think that my personal observations are indicative of the anticipation that 5 million people will vote. This is the assumption. Whether we will reach it or not I agree with you, is questionable. We may even get higher, we may get lower. It depends on the political circumstances at the time the election will take place. We are not saying, yes, we will reach 5 million people. We are saying, assume that we are reaching 5 million people, that 5 million people voted. Do you have any other comments or questions regarding these assumptions?
Yes, I understand, but I mean, I guess that my comment was based on the concern that, I mean, there is an assumption here that Israelis and Palestinians are interested in resolving the conflict, which I mean, of course, I would want to believe that there is a majority on both sides that want to reach some kind of a fair resolution or settlement or agreement, but based on, of course, on what's going on right now, you know, in the region, and based on the political climate on both sides, I would say this is a major, I mean, a major problem with the assumptions that there is a political will on both sides to reach an agreement that, you know, respects the legitimacy of the other side and respects the rights on both sides to the land, and you know, the rights on both sides to live in dignity and security. So there is an assumption, you know, the underlying assumption guiding that project that I mean, I wish I could say that I accept it, but I mean, I have some questions about the some doubts about the willingness of Israelis and Palestinians to accept an agreement, political agreement at this point.
Yeah, but we are not proposing an agreement. We are proposing a federal government. I understand your skepticism. However, you must admit that what we see now is in the constellation of the Israeli government and the Palestinian governments, including Hamas, the constellation of a federal government that has come about, that is advertising itself heavily, and 300 parliament members, and will be elected. That constellation is not in the picture right now. So your perspective is based on the current constellation of two very failed, or three failed governments that are presenting us with the only reality for political solution. And I can understand your skepticism when the dishes that are being dished for us are by horrible governments. So when the people of Israel Palestine will see a different constellation, they are very likely to have different perspective. All right. Let's go on to, if anybody else wants to ask questions, it's time to ask questions about the assumption. Since I don't see any more questions, we are getting to the heart of the simulation. And that is that we will ask people in the audience to act as Israeli and Palestinian leaders to simulate how the separate Israeli and the separate Palestinian governments will respond to reasonable legislation. And we will ask the audience, the audience, the rest of you, to be either Israeli or Palestinian parliament members representing districts in Israel and Palestine. Some districts are exclusively Israeli, some districts will be exclusively Palestinians, and many, many districts are both Palestinians and Israelis. So before I ask you to identify what district you represent, whether you're Israeli or Palestinian, I'd like to have a person to act as Palestinian president. Do I have someone volunteering to be Palestinian president? Please speak up or raise your hand. Palestinian president. And I also need someone to act as Israeli prime minister. Assuming the personality of the current leadership, do I have an Israeli prime minister? someone to act as Israeli Prime Minister, please? Do I have someone to act as Palestinian president? All right, you can decide later. But at this time, I'm asking you, the audience, to identify whether you are Israeli or Palestinian parliament members. So you're gonna see a choice on the screen. If you are a Palestinian parliament member, please vote Palestinian. If you're Israeli, please vote Israeli. So we are conducting a simulation in which you will be either Palestinian parliament member or Israeli parliament member. Okay, give it another 10 seconds. We have 11 Palestinian parliament members. Please end the poll. Show 12 Palestinian and 8 Israeli parliament members in this simulation. Okay, let's stop the sharing and we're going to go on. The first order of business for the parliament is to pass and ratify a constitution. This is a short version of the long constitution. It's kind of condensed the and make it clearer, easier to understand. So we will need to ratify the constitution. The parliament will need to ratify the constitution. Since you were elected as parliament members, you will have to ratify it. Otherwise, you will be expelled from the parliament. Is Libby Trubman here? Libby, are you able to read the Constitution? Okay. I'll read it out. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli government, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislature and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges with a system to avoid biased decision based on nationality. So the important part of it is that we do not intend, we are constitutionally prohibited from undermining any agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. If they agree to, for example, two-state or one-state, constitutionally, we are prohibited from undermining those agreements between the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. We also agreed to, in the Constitution, to give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments if our legislation violates their sovereignty. So, does anyone have any questions before I get to Professor Yehudai to give his opinion regarding the Constitution? Does anyone have any questions regarding the Constitution before we ratify it and give an opportunity to Professor Yehudai to respond? Any questions? Does anyone have any questions regarding the Constitution? Okay, seeing no questions, I'm going to go to Professor Yehudai. Professor Yehudai, do you have any questions or comments regarding the Constitution?
Yes, I have a question or a comment about the relationship between this body and the Israeli and Palestinian governments. The Israeli and Palestinian governments will have a right to veto decisions that involve their sovereignty, right, or issues that relate to more, substantial matters regarding the areas that they control. So it seems to me that the IPC would not be able to resolve the most significant core issues that determine the political reality, because those issues are under the sovereignty of Israel and Palestine. Territories, settlements, refugees, Jerusalem, military activity. So if I understand correctly, the structure, it seems that the IPC would try to function and to try to promote various programs of cooperation without being able to really change the political reality or to create a normal political environment, because all those issues would be determined by the Israelis and Palestinians and their governments. And we know the problems in reaching an agreement over all those core issues. So it seems like there could be a very awkward, difficult situation where there would be there would be war or no agreement, no peace and conflict, and the IPC would be trying to, within that problematic framework or reality, would be trying to promote various projects of cooperation or joint government. And then another problem, again, if I understood correctly.
Well, Professor, if you don't mind commenting on the Constitution rather than the wisdom of having a third, just the Constitution itself. Do you have any questions or comments regarding the Constitution?
No, but the Constitution also involves the relations with the Israeli Palestinian governments. It relates to my comment relates to the Constitution.
Yeah, you're correct. Yes.
Yeah, and so related to that, I think you said that the IPC would continue to exist even if there is a solution. One state solution, two state solution. So I'm wondering what would be the role of that body if there is already some kind of an agreement between Israel and Palestine, two-state solution or one-state solution, which would already create some kind of a structure for cooperation between the two states. So why do you need a third body? Or what would be the role of that body if there is already an agreement?
Well, let me respond to your second comment first. And the purpose of having a federal government, even if there are two states, is to expand the opportunity, to expand the horizon of the two states. Just like the United States has a federal government that gives it a lot more flexibility with 50 states, even if the Israeli and the Palestinian governments agree on a resolution, which they have not done so for the last 74 years, they are governments without vision, dangerous, that are based on military base, not a constitution. Neither one of them have constitutions, that are unstable and dangerous to the people of Israel and Palestine. This is based on their past performance. The federal government will be a balancing government, a government that would give stability to the people of Israel and Palestine, and in addition will give it a vision to expand into the future, give it a lot more flexibility in terms of peace, in terms of economy and in terms of the relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Now, as to your first comment, that the Israeli and the Palestinian government would basically veto everything, that's the essence of our simulation. The common federal government will actually demonstrate the inability of the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to protect the people of Israel and Palestine, and it will have its own perspective, not the Israeli perspective or the Palestinian perspective, but a broad view perspective of peace. And if it passes legislation that benefits and give peace to the people of Israel and Palestine, it would be politically difficult for the government of Israel or Palestine to veto such legislation, because in reality, the only government that will have legitimacy in the area is the federal government, because it's the only government that is elected by the people of Israel and Palestine. It's not based on religion. And it is able to have a constitution that both sides, both people, maybe not the governments, but remember, the governments are failed governments, but the people of Israel and Palestine and the parliament members have ratified. So let's go to the ratification. Let's go to the Palestinian parliament members. Please ratify the Constitution. And remember, if you vote no, you will be expelled from the parliament. Palestinian parliament members, please ratify. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members ratify the Constitution. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please ratify the Constitution. Okay, publish the vote. The one Israeli parliament members who did not accept the Constitution, you are not qualified to be a parliament member, and therefore you are expelled. And the person who received the second number of votes in your district will become a parliament member, and you are not permitted to vote on any legislation because you failed to accept the Constitution. So congratulations, we have a ratification of the Constitution, and this is the first time in history that a secular constitution in Israel, Palestine has been ratified, with the separation between religion and government for the people of Israel and Palestine together. Let's go to the first legislation, granting a veto power to the separate governments. Does anyone want to read that legislation out loud?
I'll do
Please
it.
raise. Go ahead. Una.
Granting a veto power to the separate governments.
Okay.
The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision for peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel on issues in which it is indispensable, the Palestinian government on issues in which it is indispensable. In the event of changes in the entirety of the Israeli or Palestinian governments, this legislation may be amended or repealed, subject to the IPC Constitution. The Parliament will decide on indispensability. Vetoes may be bestowed individually or collectively.
All right, so the difference between dispensable and indispensable. If the legislation relates to land or police force or to removal of the wall, for example, the governments, either the Israeli or the Palestinian governments that have jurisdiction over that, they are indispensable. That means they will have a veto power regarding the use of land, police force, and removal of the wall. But with regard to the budget, to the IPC budget, or ratifying the Constitution or appointing our own judges, they are dispensable and they do not have a veto power. Why do we give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments? Because a veto power gives a safety net to both sides. They understand that if the legislation violates their sovereignty, their interest, then they have a veto power. It also increases the likelihood of Israelis and Palestinians participating because they do not see or will not have an argument to argue that the federal government is trying to undermine their own government. It will also decreases in the Israeli-Palestinian government's opposition because they will understand that, in fact, the Israeli and the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation government is seeking to work with them and not undermine them. And it will also remove any claims that the IPC has subversive intentions, because by giving a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, the IPC puts itself below the Israeli and the Palestinian government and recognizes their power. It gives legal protection to the candidates from any legal claims by the Israeli or the Palestinian governments that they're trying to undermine those governments. And it compels the IPC to thread the needle to find out the least objectionable legislation that would benefit the people of Israel and Palestine. So it basically creates a platform for negotiations with a deadline to reach a resolution that does not violate the sovereignty of either Israel or Palestine. Does anyone have questions? And then I'll go to Professor Yehudai, and then we'll vote. From the audience, do you have any questions regarding this veto power? Audience, please. Okay, seeing no questions. Oh, sorry. Heather Nicholson, go ahead. What's your question?
Thank you. Just a technical thing at the very bottom, vetoes may be bestowed individually or collectively. Could you give me an example of how that would be applied?
Yeah, if the area is totally within the jurisdiction of one government, then there is no need to give a veto power to both governments. So, for example, removal of the wall. There is no need to give a veto power to the Palestinian government because the only government that has jurisdiction over that we are requesting that will remove the wall is the Israeli government.
Perfect.
Now we may,
Oh.
Go ahead. Any other question?
No, I was just saying thank you for that. Somehow
Okay.
it hadn't quite dawned on me exactly what that meant, but that's perfect.
Yeah, I understand. Any other questions? Okay, Professor Yehudai, do you have any questions or comments regarding the veto power before we vote on it?
Yes. So how do you make sure that the Israeli and Palestinian governments agree on the definition of dispensable and indispensable issues? You define them, but then I could imagine situations where The Israeli or Palestinian governments would would say that a certain issue that which you define as indispensable is indispensable.
Well, we decide whether it is dispensable or indispensable. We do not leave that definition to the Israeli or the Palestinian government. And the way we make that decision is very simple. If we are not able to implement the legislation without the cooperation of one of the governments, then they are indispensable and they get a veto power. If we can implement the legislation without them, then they are dispensable and they do not get a veto power. All right, let's take a vote. The Palestinian parliament members, we need 55% of the Palestinian parliament members to vote yes on this legislation. 55%. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote. Israeli parliament member. The parliament member who was expelled is not permitted to vote because he's not part of the parliament. Okay, publish the vote. 100% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. So now we can move on to actually substantive legislation. Up to now, we've dealt with procedural legislation that are very important. And the first substantive legislation is rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel. Una, can you please read this legislation? Read it out, Una. Okay, Charles, can you read it out, please?
Una was muted.
Oh, Una, you need to unmute. Una? Okay, Charles, can you please read the legislation?
Rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel. The IPC is the only legitimate government in Israel and Palestine, consisting of 300 parliament members elected by the entire population. Approximately 125 members represent the destroyed areas. The IPC is committed to the well-being of all people, including the 5 million individuals directly affected by the violence since October 7. The IPC believes that the future of the Gaza and Israeli people is interconnected. It is unlikely that the Israeli and Palestinian governments will be able to restore a normal, peaceful existence in the foreseeable future. The IPC is requesting a $50 billion grant from the international community, which includes Israel and Palestine, to fund and coordinate the rebuilding of the devastated areas. The IPC will prioritize the following. 1. Rebuilding thousands of homes, roads, hospitals, civic buildings, and infrastructure to facilitate the immediate return of all people to their homes. 2. Restoring law and order and civil society that have been destroyed. 3. Developing safe routes for peaceful movement of Palestinians between the West Bank and Gaza in both directions. To achieve this rebuilding, the IPC is calling for an immediate ceasefire and the immediate return of all political prisoners in Israel and Palestine to their homes. Both the Israeli and Palestinian governments are given veto power.
Yeah, sorry. So this legislation is very interesting. Not only is it good, in my opinion, and now I'm acting as the president of the parliament to demonstrate, but it is interesting because it does not really rely on enforcement. It demonstrates the option, the unique option that me as the president and you as the parliament members have, that neither the Israeli nor the Palestinian governments have or will ever have. And what is the option? The option is we are representative of the whole area. We are not Israeli, we're not Palestinian, we are the legitimate elected representative of the whole area. And we have a lot more options to go to all countries, all governments, all major companies around the world and collect or try to collect $50 billion to help our people. The Israeli government does not have that option. The Palestinian government does not have the option. But we, as the parliament members, and me as the president, we have this unique options. So, does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation?
Excuse me, Joseph, I have to apologize. I pressed the wrong button. Therefore, sir, thank you, Charles, for reading my part. Sorry.
All right, no problem. Don't worry. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
My quick question. Israel owns Gaza, so and the West Bank. So how can you tell I'm going to build something on your property, whether you like it or not? I mean, of course they will veto it, no?
Well, we are not saying we are going to build it whether you like it or not. We're saying you don't have any other options. And if you decide to veto it, you are going to be harming your own people, the people of Israel, who you have and Palestine and Gaza, that you have no option to give them a future. And you're going to be unable to build Gaza and Southern Israel. So if you have to be out of your mind to veto this legislation, because we are basically helping you come out of the big hole that you created. And if you dare to veto the legislation, and now we don't have anyone volunteered to be, but a prime minister or Palestinian leader, but me as the president, I would put tremendous pressure on them and seek their removal, because they are acting against the people, their own people. Any other questions?
Margaret has her hand up.
Yeah, hi, Margaret.
Hey, guys. Hey, do the outside external donators have any oversight power?
No. No, they have no oversight power whatsoever. They are interested in rebuilding Gaza and Southern Israel. And they are interested in not being embarrassed by me as the president for not participating, because they are participating in giving arms and military weapons. And if they dare not give funding to rebuild, then they will be exposed. Any other questions?
Just quick comment. Maybe not oversight, but there will be report. They will know what's going on. It will be.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the idea is that that's a technical question. If that was your intention, that there may be that the federal government itself may be acting in bad faith. No, and the idea is that the whole operation will be done through the World Bank under transparency and with open reports to everyone. Any other questions? All right, let's go to Professor Yehudai. What are your thoughts regarding this legislation?
I have a thought about the language in the end, for the last sentence, immediate return of all political prisoners in Israel and Palestine. I'm wondering what this term political prisoners refers to. I mean, it's so there are prisoners, Palestinian prisoners in Israel right now. Some of them are in prison because they engage in terrorist activities and killed Israelis. Some, not all of them, but some of them. And then there are in Gaza, there are Israeli civilians who have been kidnapped from their homes. So it looks like you're drawing a sort of a parallel between the two types of prisoners here, or hostage action prisoners, and calling them political prisoners. So I would like to hear some clarification about that language. What do you mean by political prisoners? And then, I mean, I think it was already discussed in questions of other participants, but I'm also concerned about the connection between the political order, the type of government that would emerge after the war, and the process of rebuilding. How do you make sure that you disconnect Hamas, for example, from the process of rebuilding? Let's assume, I'm assuming that Israelis will not return to their homes in the south, knowing that Hamas is still controlling Gaza. So there should be some connection between the political reality after the war and the process of rebuilding, the economic rebuilding.
So you have two questions. How do you define political prisoners? And the second question is, how do you make sure that no other political entities, including Hamas or the Israeli government, will take control of Gaza, correct? Okay, I don't see your response, but I'm gonna, so
Yes,
political,
correct.
yeah, political prisoners, we will define and we will submit a list to both the Palestinians and the Israeli governments. We have a judicial branch of our government. We have a parliament, and we will create a list of all the political of the prisoners that we define prisoners. We will use guidelines that was already given or created by the Israeli and the Palestinian governments, including Hamas, in previous exchanges. So, and that would be subject to review by the Israeli and the Palestinian governments. And if that would be a break it or make it deal, we can negotiate, obviously, on the list of political prisoners. Regarding your second question on how do we maintain, how do we make sure that no other political entities hold control of Gaza? Well, the way we do it is we are the only legitimate government in Israel and Palestine. We are elected, so we can create our own police force, our own jurisdiction, and we will negotiate with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments on an incremental basis for each area to make sure that they will agree on certain rebuildings and give their assurances that they will not take part of, will not assert control. But there are no guarantees, obviously, but I am sure that once we do that, the hearts and minds of the Israeli and the Palestinian people will change tremendously in our favor. And the hearts and minds of the people of Israel and Gaza will support us and reject any other entity that tries to take physical control of the area. All right. Any other questions regarding this legislation? So let's go to the
Una and Sean have their hands up. Or
okay,
Sean.
I'm sorry. Una, you have a question?
Me? Okay. Just one question. Everybody's asking about Hamas, that they don't like Hamas and they want to get rid of Hamas. But do you think if Israel and Gaza signed a waiver that they're going to have a permanent ceasefire, there's no more attack, then that would do you think that would get rid of Hamas if they signed a waiver saying permanent ceasefire, no more, and then that would eliminate Hamas? That would get rid of Hamas.
I'm sorry, you're speaking very softly, and I didn't understand the question.
What I'm saying is, do you think if they signed a permanent ceasefire on Gaza, Israel signed a permanent ceasefire on Gaza, would that get rid of Hamas?
If Israel and Hamas agree on a ceasefire,
Yes, a permanent ceasefire. That would
if that would get rid of either Hamas or the Israeli government, the answer is no. In my opinion, no. A ceasefire actually acknowledges the existence. I mean, you don't sign an agreement with someone that you anticipate will evaporate. What's the purpose of, I mean, you acknowledge their validity, you acknowledge their existence. So I think that a ceasefire agreement by Israel and Hamas will actually strengthen the legitimacy of each entity within its own people. Did I answer your question, or am I misunderstanding your question?
No, I understand. I understand. Yeah.
Okay. Now, just to
Can I
answer,
have a question for Ori, please?
yes.
Ori, first of all,
Oh, who is
again,
speaking now, Una?
Una, yes, sorry. Thank you again,
Yeah.
Joseph. Thank you again for the very hard work you're doing. And a question for Ori. I'd like him to tell me what happened to all those prisoners who have been in Israel jail for many, many years with they've never been convicted of anything. What about those people? What do we do with them, Ori? As for Ori, I'd like to know what he's thinking about that.
Those people are victims of injustice,
Thank you.
which is part of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank. But my comment related to the language that I think should recognize the different types of of prisoners or people we're talking about. I'm not dismissing the suffering and the injustice inflicted on Palestinians, including their prisoners.
Ori, how would you suggest we change that language about the prisoners?
I haven't thought about it. I can't just tell you quickly an alternative terminology. But I mean, this is something that the parliament would have to decide.
Yeah. Okay. We have Charles, and please ask questions regarding and Shlomo.
Couldn't we, I mean, we're defining our own use of the terms confederation, federation. It would seem to me that our own system would have its own definition of what constitutes a political prisoner, on both sides. So we would define.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty easy because we know what criminal laws are. Okay, so
if our judicial system reviews the case, it'd be fairly easy to determine without applying pejoratives like, terrorist or, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's the underlying message here, because Palestinians and Israelis are going to say, are you going to release, or mostly Israelis are say that, are you going to release people that have blood on their hands? And Israel has released people with blood on their hands. That's why I said we will use the we will not shy away from using precedents that was created by Israel. But we all know what it means. It means the people that Israel that have blood on their hands, but they have blood on their hands not for personal criminality intentions, but for nationalistic, for their own political agenda. So I think that we know exactly who we mean. The question, the underlying message by Ori is, are you gonna release people with blood on their hands? And the answer is yes. Yes, we will. Israel has done it too. And so the question is, how do you determine who they are? And we will submit a list, and it will be up to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments to reject it. And if they reject it, they'll have to explain why is it that they have conducted themselves in the same fashion in the past. All right, let's go to the Palestinian parliament members.
One second. Why not omitting just the word the political? Release the prisoners, period. And apropos blood on the hands, I don't know any Israeli prime minister who doesn't have or didn't have blood on his hands. So it's very tricky here, this blood on the
Yeah, but
hands.
he's not a prisoner.
I know.
Yeah. All right, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote on this legislation. Palestinian. Okay. 5 more seconds to vote. Release the vote, please. I mean, 9 out of 9, which is more than 55% of the Palestinian parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Look, the idea is to show that there is a mechanism, that we can create a mechanism outside the Israeli and the Palestinian current mechanism to resolve this issue and to make peace. Okay, publish the vote. 8 out of 8 Israeli parliament members voted in this legislation, so this legislation passed. And whether the Israeli or the Palestinian governments will veto it, it will be, they may want to negotiate some differences, or they may accept it. But the idea, what we are trying to demonstrate, is that we, as a federal government, have the political power, the political legitimacy to demand that this conflict and aspects of this conflict will be resolved mutually for the people, and that we have the power, the political legitimacy to demand that. The Israeli and the Palestinian governments do not have that political legitimacy. They're elected by a portion of the population, but we are elected by the entire population. And that's the point. All right, let's go to the next legislation. It's a joint economic zone. Charles, can you please read that legislation?
Joint Economic Zone. Joint Economic Zone, JEZ, between Israel and Gaza. Exclusive IPC management and control in cooperation with the existing governments. A common economy. Education, industry, banking, agriculture. Sewer treatment, desalination plants, solar farms, wind power, and green energy. International airport and seaport, equally accessible to Israelis and Palestinians. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian governments. We bestow upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
So here we are proposing that a common area, equal area, will be donated by Israel and by Gaza to create this joint economic zone, to have a airport, seaport, that would give employment and facilitate the economy of both sides. And it will be managed by the IPC, not by Israel, not by the Palestinian government, whoever they are, but by the IPC. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? Questions? Please raise your hand.
I have a question, Joseph.
Yes, please.
You're talking about joint economic zone, but Israel already has an economic entity. So how would you go about?
Well, Israel is almost all of it is a joint economic,
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
an economic zone. But we are interested. We're not the Israeli government. We're not the Palestinian government. I am the president of the whole area. I want the people of Gaza and the people of Israel to live in peace. One of the problems that they have is that the people in Gaza do not have access to the world, that they live in a enclosed area without normal economy. And as the president, I want to have employment. I want to have as much freedom, economic and otherwise, to the people of Gaza and Southern Israel, because the people of Southern Israel are also prisoners of this ghetto that was created by Israel against Gaza.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, any other questions? All right, Professor Yehudai, Ori Yehudai, do you have any comments or questions regarding this
So the fourth,
legislation?
yeah, the fourth point mentions education. So this would be part of the joint economic zone. It would be schools or other educational facilities in the economic zone. What's the role of education here?
The role of education is necessary, is the foundation of a society that's seeking peace and seeking a normal economy
Yeah, I
and
understand,
engagement.
But this is about a joint economic zone.
Correct.
So there will be schools inside the economic zone.
Yes, yes, universities, technical schools, yes, absolutely. So people from all over the world can come and study, yes.
And the universities will be managed by the IPC?
No, the joint economic zone will be managed by the IPC. The universities will be managed by the university themselves. It could be that, for example, Harvard University will decide to open a branch in the joint economic zone. It could be that Oxford will decide. It could be a combination. It could be a other universities, Jerusalem, Gaza, Ramallah, Berzait, all of them will send professors. That's a technical question, but the idea is to have secular studies to benefit the people of Israel and Palestine.
Okay.
Joseph,
All right.
Joseph, can I have a quick question again? My mind is going
Sure.
100 miles an hour. You're assuming you will have got rid of America by then. You will not be a subject servant of America.
We are an independent, separate government for the people of Israel and Palestine. We do not want to get rid of anybody. We want to give benefit. America is a powerful economy, and we are seeking the American cooperation, not in giving us weapons, but in giving us education, in giving us economy, in giving us access to the world. It's just we are looking at a different relations with other countries.
But maybe I'm totally wrong, but am I right to assume that the Congress in America is an APEC convention? How would you get rid of that?
We are not able to get rid of institutions in other countries.
You'll have to, otherwise you won't stand a chance to do what you want to do. APEC will stop you.
Our power is legitimacy that comes to us from the people of Israel and Palestine. And in fact, we have legislation on that specific issue, is that we are, as a common federal government, we are seeking all the countries around the superpowers around the world, including the United States of America, including Russia, including Iran, including other countries, to reduce the weapons that they are sending to this country. We have the power of legitimacy. We have the power of the people that was given to us by the people of Israel and Palestine, a political and legitimate power to demand that they will would not conduct themselves in a way that will be harmful to us.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, let's go to the Palestinian problem. I'm sorry.
May I have a question?
Yes, please. Who is this? I don't.
Maury?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what kind of role do you expect from UN? No involvement, or just you can count on the role of UN?
Of the UN?
Yeah.
Well, we have legislation specifically on that. We are seeking to have a UN recognition of our government, and we will make our voice heard in the UN. Look, we are demanding the protection of our people. We are demanding that our people, and by say our people, the people of Israel and Palestine, or Palestine and Israel, no matter how you want to call it, will not be subjected anymore to wars. We are demanding that from any entity that we see is contributing or harming our people. And we will expose those. And all these arguments that they are going to make, we will refute those arguments, because we are the people of Israel and Palestine together, demanding to live normal lives and to live in peace. Sean, do you have a question?
Yes. According to what Ona was saying about the APEC, now I just want to ask you something. You think if Israel or Palestine don't like us, or APEC don't like us, do you think that they're going to try to put an effort to boycott the IPC? Do you think they're going to do that if they don't like us?
Well, I think that many institutions, including the existing governments, would try to harm and try to possibly try to diffuse the idea of a federal government by calling it names and denigrating it and ridiculing it. Yes, I think that is possible. That's why I think that we need funding, tremendous amount of funding,
right,
to refute all of these governments and all of these organizations. And I think we can succeed, because they are a model of failure. They're a model of failure. And they themselves, by the way, believe in a federal government. And then they themselves believe in the separation between church and state. They believe in separation between the executive, the parliament, and the judicial. Everything they stand for, we stand for.
Right, okay.
Any other questions?
Like,
All right.
quick-
let's-
Another
Yes.
quick question.
Okay.
Yes,
Can I? Oh,
yes, please ask. Heather?
okay. Yeah, regarding the joint economic zone. Okay, and so just here it said in the common economy. I would appreciate if you could give me a kind of concrete example. Common economy, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example,
Mhm,
let's say you are a manufacturer of cheese in Tel Aviv,
mhm,
and you want to export your cheese to countries that are currently not able to do business with the state of Israel. You will be
Uh-huh.
able to facilitate your export to
Mhm.
those countries by using the joint economic zone, by using the international airport, by using, so you'll be able to distribute and manufacture your products under the joint name of a joint economic zone. If you are a Palestinian manufacturer, then you would be not able to sell to Europe or the United States. We will negotiate that they will accept your products from Gaza or from the West Bank, and we will be able to export them under the auspices of the IPC. So you will not be selling your products as a Palestinian or Israeli. You will be selling them as
Mhm.
under the IPC. And there are many, many examples. I don't have, I mean, it gives you the flexibility to
Mhm.
deal with entities and removing the political difficulty of doing so, because we're not Israelis, we're not Palestinians. Any other questions?
You,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Once, thank you. Once an election, with the occurrence of an election, so 5 million people voting, IPC goes in place, what are the ramifications of that, given the war crimes of the existing governments, either internationally or otherwise, legal ramifications or other ramifications of just having that election take place whatsoever? I mean, I think that's getting into legal territory that's far above my
Yeah.
head,
Well, having an election, having elected a common federal government does not nullify any other legal system. So whether it's the International Court of Justice or the Israeli court or the Palestinian court will still continue to exist. We are not nullifying any other system. Now, we may decide to suggest to create our own system to deal with war crimes. And it may be that the Israeli and the Palestinian governments will be more amenable to that, because it will be, the trials will be conducted in the area by federal judges, Israelis and Palestinian together. And we have, by the way, the Constitution clearly states how how the judges will make a decision. Basically, just to make it a long story short, in order for anyone to be found guilty, you need a majority of judges from his own nationality. So if you want to find an Israeli guilty, you need to have a majority Israeli judges. And if you want a Palestinian to be found guilty, you may want to, you need to have a majority Palestinian judges to find him guilty. They may decide, well, we prefer to have that system because the witnesses are in here, the jurisdiction is here, we are a lot more familiar. I'm not, but to answer your question, it does not nullify any other judicial system.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I suppose just to push it a little further it, how do you get both under steam? Are there any implications at all of having such an election and putting such a body in place that are there
Yeah.
other implications, I guess is what I'm looking for, that because it's a delicate situation. The intent is that you're not taking anything away from the existing government so that they don't feel threatened.
Are you referring to positive implications or negative implications?
Any implication. So the existence of the IPC would not delegitimize either of the existing governments.
Correct.
And yet at the same time, it needs to get its own standing.
Correct.
And I suppose I was just wondering, neither positive nor negative, what other frameworks or implications there were, perhaps probably mostly internationally, that might come to bear in surprising ways or unsurprised, just things that most of us might not be aware of.
Well, I can tell you the positive implication and the possible negative implication. This will be an earth-shattering event if this is in the first time in human history where the area of Israel, Palestine, whatever you call it, developed a democratic system that separates religion from government and common to the people who reside there, whatever you wish to call them. And that could be a tremendously, it has tremendous economic and political and democratic effect. Now, some people suggested, well, that could bring to violence. In other words, there could be violence against people who are possibly running. That could be, I'm not suggesting that it cannot, but it's not an area without violence, okay? So you can't really make that argument. It's not a peaceful area. It's an area with tremendous amount of violence. In order to make this a reality, we need to strengthen and assure the people that are running that there is a international support, and we need to educate the people of Israel and Palestine. That's why we need such huge amount of funding to assure them that they're not going to lose their livelihood, that they are not going to be a enemy of their own people. We need to educate the people of Israel and Palestine. Now, there could be a lot of unintentional consequences, just like creating any other democracy around the world. The difference is that people like us sat together 500 years ago and had the exact same discussion that we are having now on Zoom. They did that in person, and all these issues. They were afraid of the king. They were afraid of the emperor. They were afraid of the unforeseen circumstances. Yes, but in the long run, I think that's the way to make peace.
Agreed.
Thank you.
I
All right,
was
let's
hoping there might be some positive hidden nuggets in the international sphere that could spur it as well. So I wasn't just thinking negatively.
Yeah. All right, let's have the Palestinian parliament members vote on this legislation, Palestinian, on joint economic zone. We're just demonstrating how if a common federal parliament will see the issues in a completely different way and would negotiate Palestinians and Israelis representing their own district, that they have it's a completely different ballgame. Okay, 100% of the Palestinian parliament members voted yes. Let's go to the Israeli parliament members. I see more Palestinian parliament members joining, which is wonderful. Israeli parliament members, please vote. Okay, publish the vote. Also 100% of the Israeli parliament. That's the essence, to show that there is that we can look at this conflict from an entirely different perspective, and both sides will accept the same resolution. That's the purpose. Whether the resolution is good or not is not really the main issue. Okay, now we're having an open discussion. Is the Israeli and the Palestinian governments capable of rebuilding Gaza? So I'm going to stop the share. We should have voted on that. I don't know. I skipped that, but we'll have a vote on that later. I skipped the pre-discussion vote, but nevertheless, let's have a discussion on that issue, led by Ori Yehudai. Professor Yehudai, what are your opinions? Can the Israeli and the Palestinian governments rebuild Gaza? Do you think they could? Capable?
No, I didn't prepare to this discussion, so I don't have any any comments that I thought about earlier. So the general question is whether Israel and Palestine will be able to rebuild Gaza in the current structure without the IPC?
Yes, without the IPC. Do you think they are capable of rebuilding Gaza? What would be what would it look like? How long will it take?
It's not only Israel.
We're talking about the Israeli and the Palestinian governments.
I think it's not only Israel and the Palestinians. I think rebuilding Gaza would involve, would require the involvement of international players, United States and some Arab countries. I mean, this has been discussed since the beginning of the war. I mean, I think it all depends on the agreement that will end the war. My preferred solution, which I don't think I don't know if it's realistic, but my preferred solution would be that the Palestinian Authority would enter Gaza and replace Hamas, and there would be some major political change also in Israel that would enable an agreement between the Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and Israel.
But the Palestinian
rebuilding Gaza would be part of that solution.
The Palestinian Authority are not elected by the people of Palestine or Israel. So what's the point of having an unelected government to rebuild Gaza?
There could be elections.
Okay, and what if Hamas wins the election?
And then there's no chance for an agreement.
Okay,
even with the Palestinian Authority, I mean, given the political climate in Israel, it's hard to imagine that there would be an Israeli government that would really accept two-state solution or confederation or one-state solution. But without Hamas, the chances would be higher. Would be more likely. I mean, generally, rebuilding Gaza the process of rebuilding, with all the economic and technical issues, would depend on the general settlement, the agreement that would end the war.
Excuse me, can I ask Ori a question, please, Ori? The word war doesn't ring well in my head. to have a war, you need two people, two entities of the same strength. This is not a war, Ori.
I think there are different kinds of wars. There are, wars between conventional armies, and there are wars between, when you have on the one hand an army and then a guerrilla or terrorist organization on the other side. Hamas, when it's operating in the Gaza Strip, it's a guerrilla. I think it could be defined as a guerrilla organization. So there are different types of wars. It's not, war is not necessarily as we imagine, or as existed in the past in the history of the Israeli-Arab conflict, when you have two armies fighting each other in the Sinai Peninsula or the Golan Heights, or as we know about battles in the Second World War, First World War, there are different types of wars.
All right, but the problem is, okay, Charles, did you want to state your opinion regarding rebuilding?
I wanted to ask Ori a question about, my assumption is that since, although you are in the Midwest of the United States, you follow the conflict in Israel, and that's your area of expertise. Even though the history that you teach is, if I understand it correctly, is from an earlier period. But given current events in Israel and the political situation, how much do you think that we are witnessing basically the collapse of the Israeli government? Because it seems to me that there has to be a change of government before any kind of agreement or rebuilding could take place. I just don't see Netanyahu's government. I mean, he's engaging in a war of extermination, basically, and they're attempting to, destroy the Palestinian identity, basically, and then there's such a momentum behind that currently with the sector of the population that's supporting his government. I don't see there being a possibility for any agreement unless external pressure from the rest of the world helps facilitate the fall of his government, because there's no interest on him stopping, because it would mean he would lose power and he would probably go to jail. No, I'm not putting this all on him. I'm just saying that there's this strong emotional, bloodlust, if you will, behind current events, and a political motivation behind it that is causing the collapse of what we have interpreted over time as the Israeli system, be it illegitimate or legitimate.
Ori?
Yeah, I mean, you said many things that should be unpacked. So first of all, I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure I agree with your definition of the war as a war of extermination. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that term. And I think that there are many Israelis who would want to see the war end, because they want the hostages to be released. Even if they support the goal of dismantling Hamas or destroying Hamas, I think based on recent polls, there is a majority of Israelis who would be willing to accept ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, to release the hostages. And there is a great deal of resistance within Israel to the government, and now also to the way that the government has been conducting the war. Not necessarily because they're concerned about the impact on the Palestinians, but on the issue of hostages. So people increasingly understand that in order to bring back the hostages, you need to end the war. Now, Netanyahu still has his majority in the coalition, and it's not going to be an easy process to dissolve the government. There is enough support in the government to continue the war. I think even if there, I mean, this is quite obvious that to continue the war, even if the hostages are not, even if there's no deal to bring back the hostages. But if you look at again its current polls, then new elections would probably bring about a new government. I don't know what would be the policy of the government towards the Palestinian question, but the coalition now is not a popular coalition in Israel.
But what could trigger new elections? I mean, I'm not suggesting that the comments I made apply to all of the Israeli people, obviously, but I'm saying that the proportion that are willing to maybe sacrifice 100 hostages in order to make the gains that they're making in the West Bank under the cover of the current conflict, along with whatever they possibly foresee as a future for Gaza, according to their own, what they would like to be their own dictates. I don't see them falling from power. I'm not aware of the Israeli political system, how one could initiate the transfer of power away from the current coalition.
Well, I mean, there are elections. The elections are scheduled for, I think, 2026. And this would be a chance for, for the population, for the public to elect a different government. So this is the system for replacing governments in Israel, the elections.
So not until 2026.
But now there is an issue, a political issue about the army service of ultra-Orthodox in Israel. I'm not getting into the details of that, but it creates a political crisis within the government, with various positions on that issue within the government, which might lead to a crisis that might lead to to some parties to leave the government, and that this could lead to new elections. But I mean, I don't know what the chances of that. And maybe there will be other consequences. I mean, some political analysts think that Netanyahu would initiate new elections because maybe he would want to regain the support of the public. So I mean, traditionally, historically, Israeli governments never rarely survived their 4 years of tenure, at least in recent decades. So it's always a possibility that there would be elections before 2026 or before the the original date of the elections.
Are there any members of his coalition that look like they might be departing from it in order to trigger new elections?
Yeah, I mean the party led by Benny Gantz, he joined the government at the beginning of the war to create a sort of an emergency government. So and he's I think today, maybe really soon, maybe already did. He's going to announce that he's leaving the government.
He's back now. He's back. He's retracted.
Retracted. So he left the government.
He's back in the government, thanks to the massacre last night. Yeah.
But he's also not essential to the coalition.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if he's staying in the government or not. But even if he leaves the government, the coalition would remain in place because there's still a majority of 64 members of the Knesset. Other parties would leave. Some parties might leave the government if there is an agreement to release the hostages and reach a ceasefire. So the more extreme right-wing parties that oppose ending the war might leave the government if there is a decision to sign an agreement on a ceasefire, and that would be and that would trigger the collapse of the government and new elections.
Shlomo, you have a question?
Yeah, since we are talking, so I have a question, lots of questions actually, but I will try to narrow it down. First, do you see, you're probably aware of the book by Ilan Pape, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestine. Do you see, how do you view the situation today when you try to connect between 1948 and actually before that and today? That's question number one. Question number two, how do you define
What's your question? I didn't understand your question. Could
I would like to see if to understand whether Professor Ori Yehudai views what happens today now in this extermination campaign in Gaza, the genocide there, whether he's actually calling it genocide. I am also curious about it. And if not, why not? If it is not a genocide, what is it, as Gideon Levy put it? And the other one is, so is this the same idea of the Nakba? Is this extermination campaign, how it is related to Zionism, to the essence, to the core, to the beginning of Zionism? Do you see the whole picture of it, or it is like different things?
Yeah, well, I don't think that the answer is in the nature of Zionism or origins of Zionism. I think the answer is, I think it's more complicated than that. You also have to look at the actions of Palestinians. When October 7th, when the massacre of October 7th happened, many people talked about the context. That we have to think about the context for October 7th. So we also have to think about the context for what's going on in Gaza. And the context is the terrorist massacre of October 7th. Of course, there is a larger context of the history of the conflict, but we have to remember that the actions that Israel is taking now in Gaza are connected to the attack of October 7th. Now, more specifically, you asked about ethnic cleansing. So I think that if the people in Gaza who are now became refugees because they were ordered to evacuate their homes in northern Gaza, if they return to their homes after the war or during the war, it's not ethnic cleansing. If they are forced to leave Gaza, or maybe to remain in other regions of Gaza and without being able to return to their homes, then maybe you could call it ethnic cleansing. But it depends on how things will end and develop. Because you could say that Israel ordered those people to leave their home. Israel evacuated those people from their homes in the north. So they, just to get them out of the war zone, and then when the war ends, if they return to their homes, then it's not ethnic cleansing. If the intention is to expel them from Gaza, then it's ethnic cleansing.
The intention is to exterminate them, as we all see, and there are no homes to be.
I don't think you have enough evidence to show that.
Come on.
The ICC, we all, as I said, if this is not genocide, what is it? This massacre, everyday massacre for 240 days, there is no other name for it. They destroy almost the whole Gaza, and there is nowhere to go. There is nowhere to hide.
I'm not excluding the question of genocide. It's now under legal discussion in the courts. We don't know what the court will decide. It could take years.
Oh my God!
But you talk about October 7 as wait Una, 1 second. You talk about October 7 as if this is all started there, and I know I'm sure it didn't start there.
I didn't say it all started there. I said it's also part of the larger history of the conflict.
Right. It is not complicated. It is not. It is very simple. That
complicated. I said it's part of the larger history of the conflict. Exactly,
and the large history of the conflict is not complex. It is very simple, and that's the problem. This is so simple. Yep. Basically, people coming from Europe. It is a settler colonialism, typical, except that it happened in the wrong time. It happens in a time when the whole world is seeing it and doesn't like it. And it is extermination of the indigenous people in order to take their land and to sit there. That's basically what happened in 48. That's what's happening now. And it's very, very simple. It's not complicated, except that we are, the Israelis, of course, don't want to admit. We'd like to
Okay,
fail.
Joe, let me respond to. Could you please stop the screen sharing the screen? It's difficult to have a conversation with that screen. So I mean, it is a complicated history. I think there are colonialist features to Zionism. I do not agree with people who say that there is no connection whatsoever between Zionism and colonialism. There are colonialist elements in Zionism, but there are also other elements in Zionism that undermine the definition of Zionism as simply as colonialism or a settler colonialist movement. It's also a movement of national liberation. It's also a movement of return to the homeland, and it's also a movement of the resettlement of refugees, Jewish refugees from Europe. And you also have to look at the response of the Palestinians, at the actions of the Palestinians, and how they shaped the history of the conflict, including Zionist policies. So I think it's defining it just as a settler, defining Zionism as a settler colonialist movement, and defining the conflict as a conflict between settler colonialists and indigenous people. I think it's just simplifying a complicated history. It's hard. I would advise against squeezing or a complicated historical phenomenon into a simple theoretical framework. You call it settler colonialism, and then you have all the questions answered. You have a formula, you have a concept to answer all the questions, or to define the history of the conflict. I think it's more complicated than that. And again, as I said, there are some elements of Zionism which undermine the definition of that movement as a settler colonialist movement, even though there are definitely colonialist elements to that movement. I don't think that Zionism was created to eliminate the Palestinians. The definition of settler colonialism, I mean, one of the elements of that definition is that the settler colonialist movements are designed or intend to destroy or to replace or to eliminate the indigenous population. I don't think that Zionism was created to destroy the Palestinians. It was created for other reasons. And it's also, I mean, there are also complicated questions about who should be regarded as the indigenous people. Of course, the Palestinians are indigenous to Palestine, but when you talk about the indigenous people or definitions of indigenous people, you have to ask the question of when do you start to count, when do you start to tell the story, when do you start that history? Because we know that the Jewish people had already also emerged in Palestine, in the land of Israel. So I think an argument could be made about Jews as also the indigenous people in Palestine, without rejecting or denying the status of Palestinians in that land.
Well, you
Heather, you have a question regarding that issue. Hopefully, we'll get back to that issue, whether Israel or Palestinian government could rebuild Gaza. Heather?
Okay, well, maybe I'm not going back to, I just wondered from what Ori was just saying about Zionism, then the atrocities or the activities that are going on in Gaza, how much is Zionism a part of these attacks? And, I mean,
good question.
Yeah.
It's part of the history of the conflict. It's not, I don't think we can explain everything with the nature of Zionism. There's more, and it's hard to define the nature of Zionism. There are various types of Zionism. I think that Israel is trying to prevent the Palestinians from creating their own state. I think the Israelis are trying to prevent Palestinian self-determination, but there is a difference between that and this also. I mean, it also creates violence. But there is a difference between the desire to prevent self-determination or creating a state and extermination. Those are two different things. And also, of course, we have to think about the conditions, the specific conditions of the war in Gaza. The methods that Hamas is using in that war, right, embedding itself in the civilian population. This is also part of the story.
Yeah, of course. But Ori, you cannot escape from defining Zionism. You say there are different types of Zionism. And it reminds me actually of Amos Oz. Amos Oz in his last speech, when he got to the Zionism, he said there are many types of Zionism. And I went, hey, stop there, Amos. Tell me, what do you think Zionism is? Exactly what it is, what it meant to be. Because if the Zionism, okay, let me tell you my definition from the old times, the definition that Yeshaya Leibovich used, okay, if you like. So he said, well, the Jews decided to control themselves, to have self-control, their country with self-control. They are tired from being controlled by other nations. Okay, great. But then you have a minority of Jews in a place and with majority of Arabs, double the population, if not more. The Jews occupy only 6% of the land, and the Jews want the whole thing and want it to be Jewish, meaning this majority of Jews. How do you do it? How in the world you evaporate 800,000 Palestinians? In fact, it was 1,200. The Palestinians about 600,000 Jews. So how do you do this? And that's the question. And if you read Ilan Pape's book that I mentioned, you know exactly how it was done. And it was not that much different from what happened in Gaza today.
I think partition is also an option.
Yeah, it has been an option, but
okay, I also would like to answer this question.
Okay.
Is the Israeli and or Palestinian governments capable of rebuilding Gaza? In my opinion, neither one of them is capable for two reasons. First of all, the Israeli and the Palestinian governments are the major forces that destroyed Gaza. They are the forces of destruction. The second reason, neither one of them is a legitimate government. Neither one of them has been elected, voted upon, or accepted by the people who live in Gaza. They have no legitimacy. There is no evidence whatsoever that the people of Gaza support them, like them as a whole, maybe few, but they're not legitimate governments in Israel, in Gaza. And when it comes back to our discussion about a common federal government, a federal government will be legitimate because it will allow the people of Gaza, including the people of Gaza, to vote for a legitimate government. All right, so that's my response to this question. Let's have a post-simulation survey. After participating in the simulation, do you support a common federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine? Please vote. Okay, I'm gonna have another 15 seconds for you to vote. Okay, and the voting, publish the vote. 100% of the participants who voted in favor of having a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine. And I don't know if Ori, you voted or not, and let's have a vote on this. After discussion, do you think the Israeli or Palestinian governments are capable of rebuilding Gaza? Vote yes or no. If you think they are capable of rebuilding Gaza, vote yes. If you do not think they are capable of rebuilding Gaza, vote no. And we are talking about either one of them or each one of them or both of them. Okay, I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds. And the polling, 89% voted no, and 11% voted yes. That means that you basically do not think that, most of you here do not think that Israel or the Palestinian governments are capable. And since you voted yes on this question, I think that at least when it comes to our simulation, there is an agreement that the best way to resolve this conflict is by a common federal government. So I'm going to focus the conversation again to have a concluding. Do you think, let's have a conversation, and hopefully with Ori as well. In your opinion, Ori, do you think that creating a federal government for the people of Israel and Palestine is a good thing, considering the alternative? And I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a discussion on that. Ori, do you think that creating a common federal government is a good thing to make peace?
I think it could help promote cooperation in various areas, but I don't think it could make peace, because I think that there was a question of whether the IPC could make peace. I don't think it could make peace, because I'm returning to my comment at the beginning, because the Israeli Palestinian governments have a right to veto the most important questions. So if you want to make peace, you have to resolve the question of borders, of Jerusalem, of settlements, of refugees, all those core issues of the conflict. Those are the questions that have to be resolved.
Let me ask you this. You said
borders, and yes, and settlement,
refugees.
Yes.
And what else?
Jerusalem.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that in order to make peace, you must resolve the questions that cannot be handled by the IPC because they are subject to veto from Israel and Palestine. So
yeah, you gave me examples of those: borders, refugees, and Jerusalem.
Yeah, the IPC did not have enough power to promote an agreement.
All right. Let me ask you this. Why is it necessary to resolve the question of border?
I mean, if it's two states, then it's obvious. But if it's two
but why is it necessary to reach that formula that was imposed on us by the government of Israel and Palestine, that the question of border needs to be resolved? Why is it necessary to resolve that question?
Okay, so let's assume it's a one state with no borders.
You didn't answer my question. My question is, why is it necessary to resolve the question of border?
No, I think I made a larger argument. I argued that the issues that must be resolved in order to reach an agreement between Israel and Palestine are issues that could not be decided by the IPC because they are subject to.
Okay, you gave me examples, and I'm trying to deal with them one by one.
Okay.
So border, clearly, it's not necessary to resolve that issue. This is as far as I'm concerned, it's a artificial issue. It's not necessary to create a border. It's only an issue that needs to be resolved if you look at the conflict from the perspective of the Israeli or the Palestinian governments. But that's not the only perspective. You can have a different perspective where you can make peace with people without the necessity of reaching a border. Correct? Okay, the second issue is refugees. What was the resolution for the refugees proposed by the Israeli and the Palestinian government after 76 years? Well, how did they resolve this?
They did not resolve it, but you need their agreement if you want to resolve it.
I know, but you are admitting that they haven't been able to resolve the issue of refugees, and you are saying, well, you're not going to be able to resolve the question of refugees, therefore, you're not going to be able to make peace. And,
I'm talking about the structure that you propose for the IPC.
Oh, so let me ask you this. What if the IPC will recognize the tragedy of the Nakba, would propose a partial or full right of return with a combination of compensation to the original refugees? Could that solve the issue?
It would be vetoed by Israel.
Okay.
I'm just relating to to your proposal.
Okay. Now, could the IPC pass legislation to compensate the refugees without the necessity of giving the Israeli and the Palestinian governments a veto power? Just compensate them and resolve the issue of the refugees.
No, so if it's compensation without return, then Israel would not veto it.
Okay, so if the Palestinian refugees accept the compensation as part of the settlement, wouldn't that resolve the issue of the refugees if they accept the issue of compensation?
So you're assuming that Palestinian refugees would not want to return, and that the Palestinian people would accept a solution not involving return.
I am assuming that they will accept that the common federal government, since the Israeli and the Palestinian governments haven't been able to give compensation or right of return, the common federal government will have its own perspective and would say, since those two governments have not been able to give a right of return or compensation, we want to resolve it by giving compensation and resolve the issue of refugees.
Do you think that the refugee problem could be solved with compensation without no return?
No, it's not going to be resolving the compensation, the refugee problems, but it would create. It's just like, you know, the Jews received compensation from Germany. They didn't get their loved one back, but it created a new atmosphere between Israel and Germany.
Yeah, but it's not the same, because the Palestinian demand is for return, not for compensation. It's
right.
Well, we're not going to resolve that issue, but
the Jews did not demand compensation. Compensation was given to them, and they voted to accept it. They did not say, well, we want to have compensation for the 6 million people that were killed. Germany decided on its own to pay compensation and submitted that decision to the government of Israel, and the government of Israel accepted that.
No, it's not true. It was the result of negotiations between Germany and the Israeli government and some organizations from the Jewish world. But it's not going to get into. I don't want to get into the.
Okay.
My point was that there are structural problems. I'm not talking about the what should be the solution for the refugee problem or for other issues. I just said that there are structural problems in the IPC program, because the IPC cannot make decisions on the core issues of the conflict. This was my point, because those core issues could be vetoed by the Israeli and Palestinian government.
The IPC could make decisions about everything. The question is whether Israel or Palestine will veto it. And the answer to that is depending on how they decide. Look, it's not like the Israeli government is not subjected to political pressure internationally or internally. They're not, they have their own needs to resolve issues based on political consideration. And if you create a different reality, they have a different considerations to take into consideration. All right. Okay. I think that so we'll go back to open discussion.
Okay. Can I speak?
Hi, Samir.
Hi everybody. Hi, Joseph. I think that you're in Israel, right, Joseph?
I'm in Yaffo right now. Yes.
You're in Jaffa already.
Yes.
Did you eat Jaffa's oranges? Those are famous Palestinian Jaffa oranges. Okay.
No, I did not.
You did not? Well, I mean, you should, because that's
Okay.
what's known throughout history, that the best oranges are from Java.
Okay, I'll do it as soon as we finish with this simulation.
Already.
There is
Already. Thank you. Already. Now, I just wanted to comment on what Professor Ori talked all about. I don't see where do you stand, Ori, on the issue. I mean, from whatever you talked about is just getting to confuse the listeners who's gonna listen to you. You don't have really a stand on the issue. As a solution, what do you see as a solution? I don't see that from all your talk for the last 2 hours, that you have a solution or you stand for a solution for the conflict. My opinion, and I always been for one secular state, democratic state. And that's the best solution. That's what I believe it is. And it is possible. It is possible if the Israelis are smart people, which I don't think they are smart people. Because if they are smart people, that is the best solution. Because number one, it does not require negotiations about anything. Number two, it does not require transfer of any population, whether Jews or Palestinian or anybody. Number three, it will accept all refugees, whether Palestinian or Jews or whatever. End of the problem, the whole conflict. It is one, I may just need an Israeli leader, like in South Africa 30 years ago, to declare it is a democratic state, equal right for everybody, one man, one vote. End of the story. All Palestinians all over, everywhere, they will accept that, if the Israelis accept that. So what's the matter with those Israelis? I mean, they have to be damn stupid, the most stupid people on earth, to have this conflict for the last 76 years and not solve it, not understand the basic concept, how to live with people. How can you live in peace for 76 years? It is simple. You just acknowledge the other party, that the other party is a human being. Other than that, if you think that you are not a human being, then you don't deserve to live on this land. As whoever, if you don't acknowledge that the Palestinians are human beings and they deserve to live equal and they have equal rights, then you don't deserve equal. You don't deserve equal right. I mean, you don't deserve to live yourself. So, I mean, if you don't acknowledge that other the Palestinians are a human beings and they deserve to live equal and they have equal rights, then you don't deserve equal right. I mean, you don't deserve to live yourself. So, I mean, if you don't acknowledge that That's what I think the solution, and you don't seem like to think that this is the right solution. Do you agree with me on that? That's my question.
Maybe I can respond and then let Ori after me.
I think the question was, I mean, it's already over 2 hours, but first of all, I think, I mean, I understand your sentiments and your anger, but I think that, I mean, there is a lot of stupidity on both sides. In terms of the more specific issues, I traditionally supported the two-state solution. I think it represents the notion that there are two peoples living on that land with right to that land, and two national movements that should realize their aspirations for national determination, which of course the Israelis have achieved in 1948 and the Palestinians have not. But I also realized that there are huge obstacles to two-state solution. But maybe I don't know if it's no longer possible. Which means that we have to think about another solution, right? So I mean, and then I think my position would be that whatever Israelis and Palestinians agree on would be the preferred solution. If they agree on the one state, then okay, let's have one state. If they agree on a confederation, then let's have a confederation. You can find advantages and disadvantages and problems and difficulties in each of those solutions. But I think that the main point is that it should be agreed, a solution that would be agreed by both sides. I think it's highly unlikely that Israelis would accept the one-state solution. You could say that it is the best solution, the most just solution, that you have to be stupid not to accept it. But I think also have to think realistically. So if we think about the realistic problems with implementing a two-state solution, we also have to think about the realistic problems of implementing a one-state solution or another. But I definitely agree with you that the Palestinians deserve freedom and dignity and life free of oppression and occupation. But a solution would not only involve, progress on the Israeli side. It would also involve major changes among the Palestinians. And maybe I will say, I mean, maybe something even more depressing or pessimistic. I'm not saying that I, totally believe in what I'm going to say, but maybe we should also think about problems that. Well, I'm not going to say it. I don't want to be pessimistic.
All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have to conclude because I have to catch a flight. And Ori's also been here generous with his time for over 2 hours. I'm sorry I have to cut you off with the questions, but I have a flight to catch and have to get to the airport. So Ori, thank you so much for your generosity and your willingness to come. Hope you didn't find it too difficult to deal with us. But we are very appreciative, regardless of the sentiments. And nothing personal here, and I'm very, very appreciative of your time.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you all. All right. Thank you.
Merci, Joseph.